Yeah.
Mechanics.
I know.
We're right now.
Welcome,
I've noticed.
councillors and staff, to our workshop and briefing session for June. Before we begin, are there any declarations? Motions to
Yep.
the items?
I'll have to go with the Rainbow Beach. Just at the end.
That is, oh yeah, item 2.4. Do you just want to give a bit of detail, as it's in a briefing, just a bit of detail around that, councillor?
Oh, because my daughter's general manager.
Right, and you'll be,
I'll be leaving the room.
right, too easy. Any others, councillors? Councillor Miller?
1.3 community grants.
3. And what's your intentions there?
Just declarable. I always do it around the grant program because of my involvement with so many community groups in the management committee.
Have you wish to stay in the room?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'll probably do that for them.
What's that?
I
Right,
put the on
Yeah.
hold.
Councillor Devereux?
I would like to declare a potential conflict around the Rainbow Beach Aquatic Centre. I intend staying in the room if allowed.
We will just have to deal with those
So tonight.
just before we go into the briefing, so at the end of the session. Righto, any others, councillors? Section 1, item 1.1, public waste and recycling bin policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Essentially, the report speaks to itself. We did present a public waste and recycling policy in May 2021. At the time, it was well received by council. That policy has been operating for a couple of years now, and we'll take the report as read. However, there are some minor amendments that we've made to the policy in order to address some operational processes that we've experienced since bringing this policy into place. I've got my Stengel here. We're happy to take questions. And Alex, is there anything you wish to add to that?
No, that's it. I'm happy for feedback.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Miller?
I think it's around about, I think it's 6.2 in the policy. It's just got around about for community groups, and it says in the policy that community groups will be responsible for their own bins. And I just wanted to clarify that, is that covering all halls or facilities that have a bin attached to their function, or is that just bins just around in general open space around the hall?
First crack at that.
Yeah, through the Mayor, look, thank you for raising that. I will seek some clarification for that if it's not clear. I think our intentions were originally around the halls, because I believe that some of those committees, as in inside the hall, because I believe that some of the leasing agreements require the user groups and the auspices that run the halls to manage their own waste. But I think if that's not clear, I'm happy to revisit that and clarify that for the final policy. So, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Alex has pretty much hit the nail on the head, but it's a condition of the leases for a number of, that question has been asked before. Some of the clubs have it in their lease that they're responsible, some that council are responsible. That's the differential with the community halls. With the sports clubs, generally they're responsible for the payment for taking away the bins. We don't put public bins there unless there is a relationship with a street frontage or a reserve where there might be a requirement for a bin. So at an AFL ground, say Jack Stokes or something, there might be bins on the perimeter. They would be council managed through the parks thing, rather than but if they're in the immediate vicinity of the clubhouse, they're the club.
Does that answer the question? Sorry.
Yeah, further clarification, because I do know that some facilities have waste, and I wasn't quite sure if this new policy would affect those, because I'm not quite sure what's in individual management agreements or things like that. So maybe it's just a question to get clarified. Because, yeah.
I was just going to say, through the mayor, if you don't mind, yeah, look, I'll definitely take that back to clarify. I won't change probably existing leases, but I will clarify with our property section just to make sure that's clear for the leasees of facilities, and then the requirements, and just tighten that up.
Yeah, because it's leases and management agreements. So I read this as leases, but then there's also management agreements and licenses. And, yeah, I just thought I'd get that.
Thank you for raising.
Thank you.
And through you, Mr Mayor, it's not different to the old policy. That change, that's still the same, but we will clarify.
Any other questions, councillors? I just have a question in relation to, it's not completely on topic, but it is in some ways. In Noosa, they have compacting bins in those public high tourist areas.
The two smart bins, Mr Mayor.
Sorry?
The two smart bins, yeah.
Yeah, that it allows them to actually, they have a compactor in there, so instead of being required to be emptied every day or twice a day at high peak periods, they can actually reduce the number of times that they need to empty those. Have we given any consideration to high use areas like Rainbow Beach to have those compacting bins installed?
So, yeah, thank you for raising that. I think the two challenges for that particular aspect are getting power to the site and the cost. I'm more than happy to look at, so the answer to the question, no, we haven't specifically looked into it. I have in a previous life, and some of the challenges are odour and the frequency of servicing. So there's no reason why we couldn't get a grant or look at something in the high use areas. I think it would be good for us to at least explore it. It'll come down to cost. It can be quite expensive, between $6,000 and $10,000 sometimes for those particular units, depending on what you get. So
yeah, I know they are an expensive investment. Noosa, speaking with Claire Stewart, found that the saving over the life of reduced attendance by a contractor to empty actually covered the added cost. And one of their issues for implementing those bins was odour. And they found that when they had the compaction, it actually reduces the amount of odour and amending. So anyway, it'd be great to see.
sorry, I'm happy to, thank you. Yeah, happy to look into it. Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe they're still on trial, those two units at Noosa. There's one at the front beach and at the main beach, and there's one on the National Park track at Little Cove. And both of those units, I believe, are on trial. They did put the second one in because the first one was working so well. It has, from personal experience, improved the waste management in those specific areas, particularly at the front beach, significantly. The bins that were there previously used to be overflowing regularly, and there was odour issues because of, it was really like chip packet detritus, and it was everywhere, and there was the bin chickens came around. The compactors, they've not got any of those issues. It's nice and tidy. They are a really great addition to the front beach, but as Ms Singer said, the cost and offset of the whole life cost is the point it's made.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Would there be a location that you would like to see one installed, or councillors like a trial at a particular area that comes to mind? Is there something?
I think Rainbow Beach is the standout location. It's our probably highest traffic tourist zone, and there are often issues, particularly at peak periods, around waste there. So I think you could pick a number of spots.
Yeah, I was going to clarify, is it more Main Street, because that's where we're having a lot of those issues of overflow?
Oh, Main Street, or even down at the beach there near the surf club, those bins are often full. You could probably find a couple of spots there without too much difficulty. To power down at the main beach might be an issue. Might have to pull up from the surf club.
Mr Mayor, I think there is power down there at the main beach because of the toilet block that's down there, near the entrance onto the beach ramp. Particularly at Rainbow Beach, it's ironic or irrelevant. Prior to the meeting, we were just informally discussing with councillors, and a couple of councillors said they'd not really had any complaints about this matter, so they thought the policy was good. And we commented that the only area we've really had complaints of such, there's two primarily, but the main one would be Rainbow Beach. So that's very topical and very relevant to consider that. We can have a look at that. As you'd be aware, we've got the memorandum of understanding that we signed last week with Noosa that was agreed by council previously. So we can engage with Carol over in Noosa and Alex's counterpart and have those discussions.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Devereux?
Thank you. It is about this, but slightly off topic again, not so much about the policy. The sands. Have we got bins down there yet, or are we still having nothing there?
That's a good question. I'll have to find out. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't think they've been replaced yet.
No.
I mean, through you, Mr Mayor, I actually think since the volunteer group that did a wonderful job down there, doing the reno and upgrade of that area in conjunction with some of our teams, part of Alex's environmental team and some of Mr O'Byrne's parks team, they haven't replaced those bins to the best of my knowledge, but we can sort that out.
I'm not sure we had them. Did we have them there?
I think there was
There
one.
were bins at one stage.
I think there was one there, if not two.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Now, Fraser Place.
They're probably in there, area. That's right.
Any other questions, councillors? Great, thank you. Item 1.2, formal request to rename South Burnett from South Burnett Regional Council section of the within to Kingborough Rail Trail. Who is the?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that one will be myself. Ms Stenholm is she's got another meeting today, and we felt that this was a fairly straightforward report for council to consider. I'll take the report as read. However, in essence, we've had for some while a Kilkeven to Kingaroy rail trail. It was originally going to Theban. Because of some of the waterway crossings, that was impractical, and we've got the rail trail that we have now. It's been named in a number of environments on a point-to-point basis, and South Burnett very strongly wanting to get some recognition for their own area and name part of the trail in relation to their council. They've only asked whether we would oppose or object to them considering that matter, and our view is that subject to what occurs today, officers would bring a report to council to say that we would go back and seek further information and suggest that we would discuss that with them when they had a name that they were considering, because at the moment they don't really have a name, but it would be our preference that we would want to retain the name. If we did agree to South Burnett naming their part of the trail a different name, then it would be difficult for us to keep calling it the Kingaroy to Kilkeven to Kingaroy Rail Trail. We'd probably have to name our section as well and go through a process to do that. But happy to take questions and happy to seek councillors' thoughts on the whole question.
Councillor Stewart?
So, Mr Mayor, would this also be part of what they're talking about, joining the Bristol Valley Rail Trail to the Kingaroy Kilkeven Rail Trail, therefore it's no longer Kingaroy to Kilkeven, it's Wapureka or whatever?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there is a longer term plan to join the BRVT to the Kilkeven to Kingaroy Rail Trail. I don't believe it's currently funded, but they are seeking funding for that to occur, and there are plans for that to occur. And so, in simple answer to your question, the point-to-point naming that the state government support, in essence, would change that Brisbane Valley Rail Trail name. So there would either be Brisbane to Kingaroy, and or we don't know.
Yeah.
No, it's a simple answer.
Councillor Smith?
At the moment, we're the poorer cousins as far as that rail trail goes.
Significantly, councillor.
Significantly, yes, and it's just about need a couple of. Anyway, is there any plans to try and improve that our section?
I think through you, Mr Mayor, that council has always been of a view that the rail trail, from an operational perspective, that the rail trail should be improved and it should be consistent all the way through. But when it was established, a significant portion of the money that was allocated went to South Burnett. And in that significant portion, they were allowed to seal and beautify the trail, which we never got that much money to do
I
that.
don't think we want to go that far anyway, but I think if you seal it, it rules out horses and that sort of thing,
Whereas ours doesn't.
it just, it's got ballast here and it's got this, for bicycles, Councillor Freeman should be able to back up on that one. Have you ever been on it, Councillor Freeman, or you just go to the Mary Valley one?
Well, it's very hard to go past the Mary Valley one, councillor Smurden, because it's like a racetrack compared to the goat track out your way. It's a terrible surface.
It is.
It's a terrible surface. I don't think we need naming rights because the surface is so rough. I think they can have whatever name they want as far as I'm concerned.
There's a number of issues with it, and one is the surface is so variable. Sometimes it's a ballast rock, sometimes it's sand, sometimes it's whatever else. The other issue is there's got these damn gates, which most of them aren't. I mean, some of the gates are simply to slow people down before they cross roads, where you don't need a gate to do that. Some of the gates are for livestock, and then BBRT they have little, what do we call them, grids.
Yeah,
Pedestrian grids.
on the BBS.
So you don't have to stop at bloody gates all the time.
I think
That's its two issues.
Summit Councillor, it's a challenge, very.
Yeah, I just want to cycle. I don't want to have to get off my bike every time I open a bloody gate.
Councillor Smith and myself met with Kingaroy counterparts in relation to continuing the trail on, and one of the topics and points that was raised was the number of gates. They were getting information to us on the number of gates. I'd spoken to former Director General Neil Scales in relation to TMR funding, and it was an in-principle agreement to an annual contribution to assist in that space, but with his recent departure, I guess is how you call it, we'll have to sort of probably start back at zero again. But Mr Scales was very, very supportive of supporting council in developing that trail to its completion with an annual contribution. Not a significant annual contribution, but a small annual contribution to sort of help it move along and replace some of the gates with grids and that sort of like to make it more user friendly. We'll just have to take that up with the new Director General in due course and see how we go.
It will always just stop at Kilkeen. You'll never get from Kilkeen to Fairmont.
That option has been taken off the table.
The link through you, Mr Mayor, the link to Theban, there was too many water courses to cross.
Oh, it's everything.
Yeah, that would have required too many bridges, which would have been an extortionate cost in terms of the calculation and creation of the trail. So that was ruled out way back when. If it pleases council, officers can always go away and do a future piece of work on that rail trail and options for the rail
At this
trail.
point, we can wait to see what comes back from the South Burnett side. I think there's a good working group there that can keep things moving in that space, and then when we've got that detail, we can. And maybe South Burnett Regional Council would rather do that work, considering they want naming rights.
Yeah.
Councillor Walker?
Mr Mayor, there was mention of cattle grids on a bike and horse-friendly trail. How do you get the horse across the grid?
They have small gates, yeah.
So the gate stays, right, okay. I'm thinking, hang on, I think we've got an issue here. The great escape.
I don't like the horses because you've got to go through the.
Yeah. Some people like a challenge, but
So
not too much.
they have a small grid generally for people to either walk or ride across, and also a gate
Tick that
to
box.
facilitate that as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I would also, in order to facilitate the report that we'll bring back on this, seek councillors' thoughts on whether they believe officers should be part of an section advisory group to an
I think staff probably got enough on the table at the moment. We'll just, there is a community group that are forming at our end, at the Kinky end, and I think, if both Kilkeevan and the community group drive it, we can rely on staff when we need to, if we need to.
There's a couple of good people in the South Burnett Rail Trail Users Group that are sort of investigating it all at the moment.
Yeah, okay.
So they seem
Happy with that.
Yeah.
We just need to recognise that when we bring the recommendation for the report, Mr Mayor, and we'll just say that council supports the South Burnett Rail Trail User Group or other community groups to represent our interests on the advisory group.
Councillor Mill?
Oh, it's just, you must have read my mind, because I was just looking that up as part of the report. What would that actually involve, staff being involved with that group? I mean, would it just be more of an information flow? Would they have to turn up to meetings, or just be in that chain of flow so we're not relying on someone else?
At the risk of opening a door, it would probably be like the regional waste group councillor. They would have to read reports, turn up to meetings, and engage with the rest of the advisory group to find solutions to the problems to enhance the structure.
Would that be an advantage to council at all, or is it just more of a local advantage? Because it does say it could be, you know, we get the information direct instead of through other systems. Not saying they're not reliable, but for council to be involved in it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, officers do have a lot on the plate. And if there was an active user group, we probably might get more benefit out of a user group. That's not to say that we shouldn't be working in partnership with our neighbouring councils. Would we get a lot out of that advisory group? Down the track, and the Mayor's referenced Mr. Scales, down the track there may be some advocacy function where we can engage with TMR through that group to get funding. But I would suggest that that's probably a little bit of an unknown at the moment.
Any other questions, councillors?
Oh, just one more. When it comes to naming, because it's point-to-point basis, and that's what it's been referred to, and I tend to personally agree point-to-point is a really good reference. Is there, because I don't want to name one section of the trail, so that could be a subsidiary name. I'm just thinking from an overarching tourism or something point of view. I mean, we've still got point-to-point naming, but then if they do name their section, then that's the name we have to use because that is the name. I'm just a little, you know, wanting a bit more clarification on the impacts of having a different sectional name to a point-to-point asset, pretty much. You know what I mean? It's like a road from Gympie to Brisbane. It's Gympie to Brisbane, you know, road Bruce High, but it has sections in it, I guess, you know.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a really interesting position. And I say it's really interesting because the Geographic Place Names Guide information that occurs in Queensland, basically there's a statutory requirement and there's outlines within that guide of how to name things. Councils can name their rail trails whatever they want to, but it's generally a good idea to name the rail trail what the public would call it. Councillor Smoodin referenced the South Burnett Rail Trail User Group. I believe that user group is very active and has already references, and the community references that section of the rail trail as the South Burnett Rail Trail. Mm-hmm. So it's arguably council should support what the community call it because that's what it'll get called anyway. And it depends on what the requirements are for gazetting it. Which is getting it on maps with that name. But nominally we can call it whatever we want to, and they can call it whatever they want to. But if we want it on a map and I want it gazetted, then we have to comply with guidelines. And often those guidelines would say, if the community call it something, that's really what we should call it.
That's my confusing because it could be Kilkeven to Kingaroy Rail Trail, South Burnett Rail Trail section. So, I mean, I don't know.
People wouldn't use that too.
Yeah, I know, but it's just it's just from a tourism point of view.
They're only asking for the opportunity to consider. They may just go with what they've got already. So I guess we'll wait and see what they come up with. Any other questions, councillors? Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Thank you.
Item 1.3, the Community Grants Program. Be a good start. Councillor Mill.
I'd like to I'll make it declarable conflict of interest due to my position on numerous management committees of community groups. I think I do this every time this comes up. I believe that it could be, you know, perceived that I may have a not a unbiased or not a bias or, you know, whatever perception because of this. However, I do feel I can make decisions in the wider public interest and I may possess information that could be useful to the room, so I'd like to stay.
Have we had an OIA?
I got one.
No, but I mean, I thought we had the department rule that these weren't
No.
actually a conflict.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Through you,
just-
Mr Mayor, this is the policy, and so it's very difficult for a councillor to have a conflict on the policy.
I know.
If we're making a grant request for funding to a specific group,
I make my decision to declare only on the one column that is if there would be a doubt in the public, and I've had doubts in the room sometimes for asking questions on stuff due to my involvement. So I would like to make the declaration. I may not have to make the declaration, but it's my decision to make it. So I am making it. I have done it all the time, and I'm still going to make it. I would like to stay there.
I can't do it. Oh, I am.
So, councillors, we have a council that's made a declaration of a conflict on something that's by them perceived as a conflict.
Public, it's a legitimate
Is
reason.
there someone to move that Councillor Milne stay in the room? Councillor Waldock, someone to second? Councillor Stewart, all those in favour? We have Councillor Stewart, Councillor Waldock, Councillor Smoon, Councillor Hartwig, Councillor Jensen, Councillor Fredman against, Councillor Devereux. Motion successful. Do you wish to make a declaration, Councillor Jensen?
Well, I probably should. My husband's the president of the body.
This is just,
I think it was declared by the LGAQ that we don't have to, but if one does, maybe the other one should, but I want to stay in the meeting. But like Adrian said, it's only the so,
well, I know your husband too.
yeah.
very relevant.
It was close to him. It's the other thing, this is a discussion, we're not formally making decisions.
It will save the council quite a few $1,000 if I don't get an OIA.
Okay. So,
So
Councillor,
maybe we should.
you'd like to stay in the room, Councillor Jensen?
Yeah.
Councillor Jensen wishes to stay in the room. Someone to move? Councillor Waldock, Councillor Fredman to second. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Essentially, we brought a community grants program policy and guidelines to council last year. We made some changes to that. Officers have now considered those changes and taken feedback from the community and wish to present a revised and a reviewed policy as we're required to do. We're supposed to do it every 12 months. And Ms Stark and Ms Harper are going to take us through the report and the salient changes that may be relevant for council.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. We will take the report as read. I guess the key change to highlight to councillors, as outlined on page 1 of the report, is that we are proposing to return to 2 competitive grant rounds per year, and that will provide applicants with more opportunity to apply and to avoid out-of-round funding requests. So as councillors will be aware, last year we trialled 1 competitive round and a rolling round. Based on that trial period, we believe it's better for the community to actually return to 2 rounds per year to allow greater opportunity to apply. We are proposing to retain a rolling round as well for those grants which are of lesser monetary value and those types of activities and events that the community groups are wishing to have a quicker turnaround on. In addition to the report that's before you, I would like to highlight that we're in June now and that we have been well subscribed in 22-23 with our grants this year. Final grant recommendations will be coming to councillors at the ordinary meeting on the 28th of June for our final recovery, resilience and wellbeing grants. And pending councillors' endorsement on that day and consideration, we expect all grant funding to be expended by 30 June. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Devereux.
With the community halls insurance, that amount, from what I'm hearing when I go to the halls meetings, is going to be very low on what they're having to pay. I just think, is there any room there to, do we know what they're going to be paying?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you. So just for councillors' information, we have 33 community halls that we consider to be community halls in our region. We have had applications from 28 halls for the community halls insurance grant category. The existing amount maximum is $1,500. We've had applications ranging from $409 up to the maximum of $1,500. The majority of applications that have come in have been around about that $1,300 to $1,400 mark, which suggests to us we're actually pretty much on the mark in terms of what that grant amount is. But I would like to clarify two different types of halls, if you like. So there are those that are owned by council, so council assets, and in those situations, council pays for the building insurance for those ones. For independent halls, of which there's Gunalda, Theebine, Glastonbury and Widgie Memorial Hall, those hall committees, which are independent organisations that own their own facility, they obviously need to choose whether they take out building insurance themselves, as well as public and public liability, volunteers insurance and the rest. So my understanding through you, Mr Mayor, is that those halls, such as Theebine and other halls, would have higher insurance expenses because they are also having to take out the building insurance themselves. Having said that though, Gunalda Hall, which is one of the independent halls, only put in a grant application for $827 rather than the full $1,500. So that's the information I can share with you.
The other three?
The other, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the other three certainly did go for the full 1,500. So of those other halls, I guess them putting in the full amount would suggest that they are seeking the maximum amount that they can get support from council. Certainly it's up to councillors as to whether you'd like to increase that amount for independent halls as compared to council.
I think you've been at the meetings when they've actually discussed this, haven't you? Or were you?
So I'm aware that through councillors bringing that to our attention that independent halls do have a range of insurance premiums that they need to meet. Yes.
But at the halls meeting?
I wasn't at the last halls meeting.
Sorry, no. Okay, so that does make this more difficult, but the figures they were talking about were closer to the 10.
15.
And 15, yeah, for those particular halls. So I don't think basing it on the $800 one, I would suggest that perhaps they're not insuring.
That's the public liability.
Through you, Mr Mayor, as Ms Stark said, there's a difference between insuring the building fabric and the public liability. We believe these requests are only for the public liability portion, generally, and that the building fabric insurance is being addressed by the hall. So the commentary that Councillor Devereux is referencing may be reflective of the overall cost of the volunteer insurance, the public liability and the hall fabric. Basically what you would consider your household building and contents insurance to be. Generally, with the private halls or the lesser halls, we don't fund that. We fund the public liability through the...
Is that in the policy, that we don't fund the...
Through you, Mr Mayor, in terms of what the grant guidelines say, for the community halls insurance, it says to support the organisational capacity of eligible...
I'm sorry, whereabouts is, just so that I can read along. Wait.
It's in the report, but it's also in the guidelines at page 13. Category 3.
Thank you.
And the purpose is to support the organisational capacity of eligible community halls to meet their insurance obligations. So no, they could apply that money to their building and their building and contents, their public liability. It's up to the hall to determine how they wish to spend their money. It just needs to be on insurance.
Okay, so...
Sorry, and through you, Mr Mayor, it's very important to recognise that the contents
No, thank you. Ms Harper just pointed out that in terms of the required support material, that we do need a minimum inclusion of products and public liability insurance to a value of 20 million. So we need to make sure that the PLI is definitely addressed if they have any more money.
Sorry, PLI?
Public liability.
Yeah.
And sorry, and the point I was making, former Stark had to clarify.
Sorry.
That's all right. Was that we don't generally cover the contents, and each hall would have different contents. So some halls may have expensive contents insurance, and other halls may not have anything, and it depends on the tables, chairs, audio equipment and so on, ovens and whatever the hall may have in. The halls themselves are responsible for that. Those tend to be the things that are lost or damaged in floods and in disasters. And so the insurance companies are increasing the level of that content insurance because of the risk to the insurer.
Yes. So what we've got are potentially 4 community halls that I think will probably struggle to come up with the 15,000. So that we're going to have uninsured, or they're going to be fundraising all year just to pay the insurance and not to actually do any events. So that's my concern. I'm not sure how the other councillors feel about it, but that's something I think
Is
should
there
be.
an opportunity, is it one or the other, where you can either be, an independent hall or a council hall? Is there some middle ground where they could come under our umbrella?
Through,
And still pay.
Want to answer the
those
board?
Pay the public one.
Instead of 15. If it was under the umbrella of the whole council. For the building.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, we had to just confer on that, but it was just about how we respond to that. Essentially, we've had advice from our insurers and our insurance office team in council that council, and this response was actually sent to Councillor Devereux in response to a question just recently. But it actually says council cannot and should not act as an insurance broker, where we are basically bringing up the halls under our insurance. If we did that, there's a number of liability issues that if it was found the hall was underinsured, council would then become liable for the operation of a hall that is run by a committee that we have no control over. So the advice is that we shouldn't bring them under our control. What we can do and what we do is we act as an introducer. And so we introduce the whole committees to our insurer and say, this is what we get. You can negotiate a relationship yourselves, but it's very strongly from our insurance team, they're saying we shouldn't bring them under our cover.
Have we had any success with that process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we understand that, so of all the council-owned halls, those hall management committees have gone to an insurance provider and taken out insurance, which is why we're providing insurance.
That's from public liability.
And volunteers.
Yeah, not for the building though.
I mean, for the building.
So they're the 4 independent halls. So I might, through you, Mr. Mayor, go back to one of Councillor Devereux's questions, which is, and I think it was yours, sorry, can there be a difference between council-owned halls and independent halls? Yes, there can be, if councils would like that. So you could have a category whereby...
No, I was asking, is there a way to bring them under our umbrella?
Through the director,
Mr. Burns answered, but if we are an introducer, have we...
Has anyone taken up that introduction?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Harper says that she believes that yes, we have.
Was there a significant saving for the hall that did that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we might have to take that on notice as we don't have that information to hand. We might guess, but I think we'd have to go away and check, if that's all right. And we could send an email to councillors and verify that. Yeah, are we okay to do that?
Through Mr. Mayor. I think under the umbrella, all of the building insurance for the halls is around 3,000 or 4,000 each.
Oh, through you, Mr. Mayor, we understand it is of that quantum, yeah?
Yeah, and through the same insurer, LCIS, the independent halls for the same insurance for just the building is 15,000 to 18,000, and they won't negotiate. That's why I said if you could take those 4 under the umbrella, and they were 3, like the hall would still pay that amount. It wouldn't be a cost to council. It's just that you can fundraise to get $5,000 a year, but when it goes from 5 to 15,000, that's pretty hard to find.
I think the insurance companies be looking at risk, and if it's just one person or one group owning a hall, that's a higher risk than council owning 27 halls.
But if council
Which
owned
spreads
it, it'd
out.
be the same risk.
But unless we own the hall, I suspect that risk can't be spread across all the halls.
So if these 4 halls are now uninsured because they can't afford it, they burn down, the council has to spend $1 million like they did on Curragh to put a hall there.
Or not build a hall.
Maybe we could go back to the insurer and just see if there's any way the independent halls could be part of what we do. Or it just seems odd that, you know, there is, if you look at each individual hall, you know, they're one building, just like they're one car. And you might get a discount because we have, you know, a lot of stuff to insure, but the risk associated with each building is exactly the same. And it's just odd that we get such a significant discount. You know, we're paying effectively 20% of what an independent hall is paying. And you know, sometimes is there some associate sort of membership or associate sort of arrangement that we can have so they still maintain their independence, because that's important to them, but we allow them to receive some discount on their insurance, because I wouldn't be comfortable having a grant system that allowed them to get $10,000 or $15,000 to cover their building insurance when we're not, you know, it's costing us effectively 3 to 4 under our own umbrella.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we're happy to go away and have that discussion and have a look at that.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what Mr James was going to say. I would just make a note, however, in saying that the independent halls can go to other grant agencies, which our halls can't, to seek grant funding to support that. There are other avenues for them to gain that funding. And it is an interesting quandary, in essence, in the value, because essentially we would be funding the building fabric of a private community-based facility, and there are other private community-based facilities that may operate within the municipality who own their own building, and we don't offer that to them as well. What we can do, as I said though, is we can go and check, and we can come back to council, but also for council's purposes, if it was required, and obviously this is a discussion paper rather than the actual report, we can change the categories within the policy to allow for a higher discretionary value to be attributed to the independent organisations. So what that means is that they could apply for more money.
I guess, yeah, that if there was some comparability between what we pay and what they pay, I could see how we could bridge that gap. But if we raise that and say, well, look, we'll give you $1,500 for public liability, and we'll also put $5,000 to cover your building, there's still a 10 grand gap there, which is impossible or very, very, very difficult for a community group to fundraise every year. To me, the gap is too far to bridge and also be fair in that process. I just struggle to understand how an insurance company can justify such a difference in, they are exactly the same building, basically in a different location. If we took that building on, how they justify 3 or 4 grand versus 15 for a community group astounds me. I think it's gouging.
Well, we do see it, Mr Mayor, in other properties too.
Oh, we may see it, but it's gouging.
Yeah,
I mean, there is no more risk with the independent halls as there is with our own halls. Councillor Deborah?
Could we lease the hall off them and sublease it back?
Through you, Mr.
And then we insure it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, anything is possible, and yes, we could do that. It's rather convoluted, but it is possible. Council will need to make a decision on that.
So, through yourself, Mayor. Look, there's new threads of information that we now need to look at. As Mr Burns correctly indicated, we can now look at that with a solutions-oriented mind, and I feel that it's that on-ground reality that needs to make sense, and we'll look at it through that lens.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Mill?
While we're on halls insurance, I did note that the cut-off dates for all grants is May 31st of the year. However, we found because they're using a lot of the existing timeframes, which is July to June for the insurance, a lot of the insurance companies won't give you a quote, which I think you require for the grant application, till about a month before it expires. So basically, by those dates, community groups which are volunteers may possibly have a couple of days to a week maybe to put a grant application in. Is there any possibility, because it is just one round and I think they're fairly straightforward, to be able to extend that a week or two just to support volunteers getting paperwork through and things like that? I know it's right near the end of the year. I did note that you want to assess in the first week of every month, but just for that category itself, just to support that because of the time frames that they're bound by the insurance companies. I don't know if that's possible to do. Or
through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that we've actually received all the grant applications for the halls that are wishing to apply, so there's no extension required. So there have been 1, 2, 3 halls that haven't applied by the 31st of May, but they have done so intentionally. Yep. So in the current circumstances, an extension is not required because they've all put in the applications.
But would it be if there was something that happened to a hall or there was a circumstance, is that something that could be a little flexible? I'm just saying they're under volunteers. I know, there's these groups and stuff happens, and if you've only got a week window sometimes to do something, it may not happen. So if it's a couple of days later, a week late, if we're regimented by the policy or the guidelines and it's like, no, that's it, you're out. Oh, sorry, something happened.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we can take
discretion,
not courage. No, not discretion.
Okay, sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may just take a slightly different tack to the way the start was going. All these matters are resolved by council. We do bring all these grants back to council, other than those that are delegated to officers. Council can resolve any way they wish at any council meeting. So when we report back to council, if we have any groups that are outside those windows or require that flexibility, we can bring it back as an exception to the policy, and council can resolve on that at the time if that is required.
Ben, just reading the report here, the rolling round categories, and I'm assuming that the table below that rolling round, it relates to the rolling round, and in community halls insurance is included in that. So if I'm reading things correctly, as it's a rolling round, any hall could apply at any time.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that correct?
So in terms of how the program was this year from 2022-23, which I think is what Councillor Milne's referring to, the rolling round was open from the 5th of September until the 31st of May. So halls did have the opportunity to apply from the 5th of September through to May. They have done so this year, but we'll certainly take on board greater promotion, greater engagement with the halls to help them get their applications in earlier. So it is proposed under next year's guidelines that they could apply from the 7th of August. They've just gone through this process. We can assist them to do that again from the get-go.
Yeah, but a lot of them already just got this year's insurance. They won't get invoices or know their amounts for the next year until pretty much the end of this grant round.
Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, because of Deborah was saying, if they don't have that information until the 14th of June, then they may miss the grant round, because between the 31st of May and the 7th of August, there's nominally a gap where they can't apply in that rolling round.
And that may or may not be the case. I guess staff has suggested that that hasn't been an issue. If it is, it can be brought to council for consideration.
That's correct.
And my apologies, Mr. Mayor, I know this is getting quite technical, but I think it does answer Councillor Milne's question, that this year we have changed the proposed guidelines to say for the halls insurance, the support material required is a quote, invoice or receipt evidencing current or proposed insurance policies, because we do understand that some halls struggle to get a new quote for next year. So we're saying, provided you can show the current quote, which just evidence the amount that you're likely to incur next year, that will be sufficient for putting in the grant application. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's an issue that's been raised. I know.
It has been raised, which is why we did change that wording to give them greater ability to apply all year round.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Milne.
It does have the operational budgets for all the rounds in here, but it's only got one of the rolling rounds. I think it's the community halls insurance. I'm making assumption that the other rounds are coming out of those other fundings, or they got their own.
That, through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. Both the rolling and the competitive come out of the budget figures on page 4 of the report.
And Mr Mayor, is if we're having 2 rounds, if the first round is heavily subscribed, does that put risk at the second round being restricted in? And what type of grants were people seeking during the year that were requiring the second round?
Through you, Mr Mayor, council grants, from my understanding, say for the previous 6 years that I've been here, have operated on 2 grant rounds per year. By spreading it out over the year, it does give applicants the chance to apply over 2 rounds. It does mean that you can get a lot of grant applications in round 1, and officers need to exercise judgment in terms of ensuring we do have some funding left for round 2. However, it's not a strict 50-50 split. If the strength of the applications is high and they have high merit, we might allocate up to 60% through councillors' endorsement, and we would bring that to councillors at the time. If the applications on merit are not that strong, it might be that only 40% of the funding goes out in round 1. So it really does, it depends on the round, and it depends on the applications that are submitted in that particular financial year.
No, that's fine. It's just strength of application more than the quantity. So no, that's fine.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Devereux.
Thank you. Just in these figures, I noticed the major events is 40,000, but when it comes to the muster and stuff like that, there are, like that one is more, isn't it?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that is correct.
So how does that figure into this? Does that come out of these figures?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it does not. So
Thank you. That's good.
Yep, it does not.
That's all I want.
Any other questions, councillors? Thank you, staff.
Mr Mayor, can I just confirm that other than that, we're happy to bring that as a report back to council? There's no issue with this fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1.4, economic development resourcing. Mr Lewis, Mr Dorr.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. I guess Tom and I just wanted to have just a discussion with you to, I guess, quantify what we can and can't deliver in relation to economic development, and put forward a number of resourcing models that council may wish to consider moving forward, so that we can agree on the outcomes that we can deliver over the coming 12 months. So I'll hand over to Mr Dorn and look forward to a good discussion.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and councillors. Happy to take this report as read. I will just preface any discussion with, we've tried to offer a direct and objective snapshot of where we're at in the economic development space, particularly from a resource perspective. And the reason behind the timing of this discussion paper to you guys today is in preparation for a workshop that Dot ID are holding with council later on this year to talk about our economic health check. So we felt it important to provide council with an overview of where we're at from a resourcing perspective, just to make sure that we were managing expectations correctly.
Any questions, councillors? All right at once. Councillor Stewart.
I guess economic development's gone to ups and a bit of a down, and now hopefully coming up again. But I know previously it was in part like business development and having seminars, but I think business development and economic development they're overlapping, but they're different. So I think we need to be clear on, and I guess that's what you're asking, what we want from the economic development. And some of the feedback I've had, and I did send him out to councillors, and I got feedback from 2 of them, and it was essentially, but also feedback from business people outside, is it's what would help economic development is things like in terms of planning scheme, getting things through planning department in a timely sort of manner. It's that sort of thing more than other things, and also I guess making sure we've got the land for industrial land and such like. So I don't think it's necessarily how many economic development officers we have so much as there's the advocacy side of it, and probably helping people through council side of it.
And
That's just my thoughts, and I'm just rambling, I guess, but anyway.
To follow up on Councillor Stewart's comments, I see other local government entities spending bucket loads of money on bodies in chairs and doing a whole lot of, effectively, as Councillor Stewart pointed out, business development. And I think we've always seen our role as a facilitator, and in that space, having the right culture, particularly in this planning space, to make sure we assist and look for opportunities rather than hurdles. And I think we've had significant success in supporting hospitality, tourism, and the events, the region's reputation with events, and being there to ensure that we've got adequate industrial land. So businesses that want to utilise our region for an opportunity have a place to go is far more important than running workshops and seminars and those sorts of things, which probably more are the focus of the Chamber of Commerce and those other community groups. I think that's their remit. We do our best work when we work with community groups rather than trying to drive the horse, or particularly if it's not in part of our core business. So I've seen what other councils do and how much they spend, and I start to twitch because it's massive amounts. And when I look at their outcome and I look at our outcome with what we do, I think we started at a place with no industrial land, and we've got in the draft regional plan, we've got that area allocated at Curra after a long period of time from our perspective, but a short period of time from what state and other entities expect. Being that facilitator and a council that helps is far more valuable to economic development and business than I think other things. So, that's my view on.
Building on that, Mr. Mayor, so you would see economic development facilitating some of those developers coming into the organisation, giving them linkages within council to move forward?
Yeah, I know some people throw out there, what are they? Okay, not a connoisseur of women, concierge, and that. Yes and no. I think we have to have an organisation that has a reputation of being one that helps, and particularly in the planning space, looks for solutions and rather than looks just to enforce a planning scheme from a prescriptive perspective. Businesses that want to move here have already done their research. They already know what the opportunities for them are, how the area demographics sit. They want to know that we're an easy council to work with, and that's the key for them. And to me, that's the foundation and the most important aspect of any economic development, because that encourages businesses to come in if they see an easy pathway. It's not that they want any preferential treatment. They just want a solutions-based organisation rather than a hindrance-based organisation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just sort of following that same thread, the creation of a economic development strategy is a corporate plan line item, and one risk that we have flagged at an officer level is having a strategy that can't actually be implemented. We're very mindful of the need in the community at the moment to have some practical assistance in this space. One concern that we have is by developing a strategy of sorts, that there won't be the resources to actually implement it and carry out that practical assistance. So that's just one risk that we flagged at this early stage before budgets and other things are decided on.
So are you tailoring the table you've got here at the back of the report? Is that reflective of the strategy, or is the strategy reflective of the table?
The table is reflective of a strategy. Yeah. So if you have a look at if council prefer that a true economic strategy is developed as per the corporate plan, that's the below line items are indications of the resources that we would need to effectively implement that. However, that's not to say that there isn't some significant activity happening in this space at the moment that is entirely practical in the absence of a written document that we're referencing. So, we are doing investment attraction and advocacy. We are doing stakeholder engagement. We are doing some strategic work with industry and businesses outside of actually having a formalised strategy.
Is there timeframes on the strategy being finalised?
I think it's
sort of view.
Q3 2023.
Oh, yeah, okay. Was Councillor Mills?
Oh, no, Councillor Debra.
Councillor Debra?
Thank you. To staff, I don't quite understand what they'll be doing. Could you run me through that?
Yeah, sure. So, it's subject to the strategy that's adopted by council. So, in strategies past that council have adopted, it's been pages and pages and pages of actionable items that need to be carried out or supposed to be carried out. We don't have that document at the moment, so the one officer that we do have is using his subject matter expertise to do the tasks that I mentioned before. Increasing the resources in that space would mean that there would be better support to our business industry, our heavy industry, our manufacturing industry, our food industry. It would mean that we would be able to provide that concierge service by having officers that people can reach out to assist them in their economic development needs.
Doing what?
Well, doing things like helping them with advocacy, helping them with marketing plans, helping them with business plans, helping them with putting them in touch with business development officers, a whole range of things.
A business, when it gets like an economic development, they're going out looking for customers essentially. So is that part of it as well? Is it going out and trying to bring large employers to the area and that sort of thing?
That's certainly part of it. Yeah, that probably sits more in the advocacy space. But we've got a function that we're hosting tomorrow at Laminex that is bringing other heavy industry together and manufacturers together to discuss some of the issues that they have, that they share, I guess. So it's part of it is, assisting them with customers, but I think at a higher level, it's helping them operate within our economic climate in Gympie and how they can leverage off some of the strengths that we have here to develop their business moving forward. And again, we obviously have a large range of businesses here. We have our small mum and dad businesses all the way up to massive heavy industry. So having more resources in that space means that we can just service that spectrum more.
Also, with the pricing there, you've got, I just don't quite understand it. So if you could just let me know, the $40,000 to $60,000 plus 100 to 200,000 baseline funding per financial year plus 2 staff. So what is the total figure we're talking about there per annum?
Well, what we're saying there is that to actually get this, engage a consultant to help us with the strategy, you're looking at about $40,000 to $60,000. So that's money that we don't have at the moment. On top of that, once we engage a consultant, we're looking at about $100,000 to $200,000 to actually create the strategy over 18 months or 2 years. And then there'd be 2 staff on top of that to actually carry out the actionable items in the strategy.
Can I suggest that it's probably not that hard?
My question is, what's the difference between an economic profile and action plan as against a economic strategy?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, an economic profile is a snapshot, a high-level snapshot of what the economy in our region is doing. So without that information, it's very hard to develop a strategy that can actually be implemented effectively. A strategy, as you've seen with tourism strategies and the like, actually steps you through a large chunk of background all the way through to what are the actionable items that staff and officers are going to do to assist our businesses or tourism operators.
Just to add to, I know there is always financial pressure within our organisation, and you know, two staff, I'm not sure. I think we need to see what the workload was. I do believe there is a need for extra bodies in this space, simply because this has fallen into my lap over the last 3 years, simply because the staff that were there were not deemed to be suitable by former management and were found greener pasture for whatever reason, and there needs to be that continuity. So if you do have a business that wishes to come, they do want to meet with myself and the CEO and others in the organisation to understand what council's appetite for it may be, or how proactive we are in a particular space. But having someone then to actually walk them through or be a point of contact, if that's the mayor, then we end up, it creates a workload that is unsustainable over more than about 3.5 years. And so it will be good to see, probably get a little bit more detail around what the actionable items are, what we're looking to achieve. And in terms of understanding our economy, it would be good to have some understanding of what are our main drivers. We sort of know them generally from the data that we receive, but we might also find that there are little pockets that they may only be in small industry, but there's an opportunity for them to grow exponentially. And without that analysis, we may be missing opportunities. I'll hand over to Mr. CEO.
I think we're very aligned, Mayor. I'll cover them. There's two discussions naturally here. Because we don't have a strategy, it's very hard, and I think there's a strategy discussion happening here. We probably need your take on where we should head as an organisation. But the second discussion is the one where we're talking about now. We don't have the team to do something, but we probably need the strategy first. Just putting that as a highlight. Currently, the team is looking at that concierge service. They're that one point of contact. So if someone comes with a business idea, they know who to meet. They take them through planning, they take them through building, and connect them to other places. The Chamber of Commerce comes to see us, and we update them on things that are happening. And there's more than one Chamber of Commerce, and the businesses are coming. And I reinforce that methodology. The data is not good here. We don't know exactly our strengths, we don't know our weaknesses, and once we've got that idea, it feels to me like there's a time of opportunity for Gympie now as a region, where the lens has moved on to our space, and we don't have to do everything for everyone, but it would be useful to know what the opportunities are so that we can take those small bits of action which will leverage something bigger. So I think, summing up, I think that we first need to understand your views on that a little bit more clearly so that we can take the right next steps. And secondly, we can also, based on this document, see some of the areas we could move into and maybe articulate that a bit more in the next presentation to the rest, what we're actually doing now. But I think there's we could offer some suggestions so that when you do look at the strategy, you know which way we're going. But this is the beginning of that.
Councillor Smooth.
Yeah, I agree with the CEO and the Mayor. It's been sadly lacking in the last few years. We've lost what I believe a number of businesses that would have come here that have gone elsewhere because of having, if we have someone here that can identify some areas of land that are suitable for where they want to go, step them through planning, just walk them through it and give them an easier path, will attract more business, which attracts more jobs, which makes the region stronger and gives our younger population somewhere to go. So
the biggest hurdle we've had in that space is available industrial land that's appropriate, and it's been I've been told we've made exceptional progress in where we've got to in the amount of time, but I feel it's always taken longer than what we'd like. But at least now we have an area that is recognised, albeit in the draft plan, that is that we can direct businesses to. There are other pieces of industrial land, but they appear on the surface to be a little bit cost inhibitive in terms of their development, and will probably need to be a few more years before prices go up before they're sort of suitable. But having someone, as Councillor Smith pointed out, to facilitate that, and that is their role, rather than it landing in CEO's lap or my lap, where we've got many other plates spinning as well, will be of great assistance. The biggest hurdle that we have faced in what I have seen is that lack of industrial land. That has been the thing that has created lack of appropriate industrial land. That has been the thing that has created massive challenges.
Probably need to sort that.
Bruce is next.
Well, we're on the way there.
Strategically, I think there's two major things, two important things. One is knowledge in the local area. If you're an economic officer, you need to practice what you preach. Don't say, come here, invest, do this, do that, when you don't do it yourself. And you don't have a knowledge of the region. You'd know what land's available. You can always go for an MCU if the land isn't available. The other thing is also understanding the planning system. So they really should be butting heads with the planning department. So walking through the process. The other thing is I see quite a large divide in the council with local businesses where we both are trying to provide a service to your clientele, but when a small business doesn't get it right, they go bankrupt and the doors close. Whereas council seems to be a little bit immune to that. You just up the rates and insult the business owner really. Sorry, bear with us. I'll come back. It's okay. Yeah. But you get the gist.
Councillor Stewart.
Now, what was I thinking? First, I want to just clarify. So, currently, Tom, you're manager of a wide area. Then we currently have a coordinator for economic development strategy.
Correct.
And then the question is whether we have one or two economic development officers under that person. We don't have any at the moment, do we?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it seemed, going by what the Mayor and the CEO have said, in the short term, probably having a economic development officer initially will be a good thing, and then we can develop a strategy and then from there see what further staff we may or may not need. That's just my current thinking, but I'll throw that there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just to answer or just to elaborate on your point, Councillor Stewart, the information that we have here is obviously blue sky dreaming. So what we're essentially saying is, if council endorses an economic development strategy, there will need to be resources there to implement it. That's essentially what we're saying. So if the resolution is down the track that we're happy with an action plan and we're happy with the activities that we're already undertaking, then we can facilitate that. However, if there is an appetite from council to expand our economic development service, then that will come with some extra resources. That's essentially what we're saying.
I think, adding on to what Tom was saying, I think, and what the CEO mentioned was, we're advocating for the development of the strategy and then looking at the resourcing that strategy may need. But we wanted council to be aware that once it does endorse a strategy, there may well be resourcing implications for that strategy for us to be able to deliver upon it.
Councillor Deborah.
No, I'm happy to.
Well, Councillor Milne was first. Or...
Oh, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Waldock. It is about the local knowledge. So having that officer or that conduit in place, it's not you guys anymore. It's actually an officer that can understand the local landscape and also understand our planning schemes. Because from my knowledge from the last couple of years, is probably that's one of the biggest hurdles that we've had is how to navigate it. Planners are plan, you know, they'll do their stuff there. But the applicants don't know how to navigate that. So that it's the outside, here's their tips and tricks to go and do that because they don't usually do that, they're doing their job. So that's integral to that actual role. Having that landscape knowledge and stuff like that. We're talking strategy here. So when I'm reading this, it was about pre-warning that we probably can't action a strategy, but depends on what type of strategy we actually adopt. So if we actually develop a strategy that's within our capacity at this stage, we can have a dreaming strategy, which could potentially set us up for a bit of disappointment and failure, or we could be looking at developing that strategy that's within what we are doing. So it still is a strategy. We do need a strategy, in my opinion, because we need that for advocacy. So if you don't have a strategic adopted direction, or you don't have that all that position paper at the front, which we'll get from the economic profiling, it's really difficult to go out and advocate for funding or stuff, or people to come in, or those other external stuff. So we do need something, but what that actually does contain and what level, because we can always revise later if we get the capacity to have more resourcing. Then we can revise the plan, put more actions in there that are achievable. But to have an absence of one or just have a small action plan, I'm not sure if they have enough oomph for that further advocacy in a way. And it's also about, we're always going about attracting new. I always see there's also that value add. So making what you already have better and having that knowledge and those opportunities that may not be known here brought to business. So that's the other part of the role as well, which is achievable. And it's all knowledge. So it's all in the head. So I hate losing that knowledge because we did have a good team and we've lost that team with absence of a team. Now we're trying to develop a new one with that knowledge. So we just need to retain that knowledge.
Councillor Freeman.
I'm just wondering what a strategy is, and I'm beginning to worry that it's a piece of sticky paper you put your foot on to put more staff on. I really want to see what they're going to do, like Councillor Deborah did allude to, and my first question would be, I'm just putting it up front, can an officer within, say, the planning department help in some of this area? And there are we've got a lot of staff in the office, and surely we might be able to start this without putting our foot on the sticky paper, agreeing to more staff, just seeing what we can do from within. Because I'm sure there are some personalities within our organisation who could, part of their week, do this sort of job. That's all.
Councillor Deborah.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Glenn. I was just going to write here about the staff. I've got down, are we pulling staff from another area, or are we planning on increasing the number of staff in the organisation? Because just looking at the figures here, we're adding on another probably $500,000 to the annual budget. I like the idea of the concierge system, I have to say. I'm not sure, did you say they would be like virtually in conflict with the planning? They'd have to take the side of the business, and yeah, I like that, because that's one of the issues that we have, is that generally people don't know a lot of stuff, and that's why they go and get.
They don't understand the process of planning. Yeah,
and also where they can push back and maybe get some leniency or something that's not as important as what we're making out. The other thing I've got is why I'm hesitant is that I disagree. The previous plan that I saw wasn't very good. We had 2 staff, and when I spoke to them for an hour, they didn't know where Theebine was, and what was the other one? There was some issues with it which I thought were really basic stuff. If you're going to do the development, you know your region, and so that's why I've got concerns. The concierge thing, that sort of model I do like, but I'd want it to be very clearly set out what the job is, so that we haven't just got people writing reports and thinking they're doing something to help. As far as real estate's concerned, though, I do I mean, that's, finding land, that's the real estate's job more than anything else. It's not necessarily council's job.
Planning scheme as well.
Yeah, but I would like to know that we've done that industrial before we even put someone on. So do the report, sure, get a consultant to do up whatever they do, but I wouldn't like to put another person on before we even have that.
I think just, Councillor Devereux, it's not unusual for people not to know the location of the economic hub of Thebon.
I should know it's there.
So, but we have, because we started effectively a point of zero in relation to the industrial land, it was a challenge, and I completely agree. Without getting to where we are now, having staff on would be a complete waste of time. We have worked very closely with our state development. We actually, part of that advocacy has resulted in state development putting a staff member on just for the Gympie region, which is a first. I think I believe it might be the first time we've ever had someone just dedicated to our region in that state development space. And I think we're at a point now where if we had an industry or a company that was willing to come and be an anchor tenant for that site, that the state would assist in making that happen, because we're far enough down the road. But without having that land, that's been our major hurdle. The land that we have available either isn't economically viable at this point, doesn't have the size that's necessary, or just simply isn't, ready or suitable to be developed. So it's been a challenge.
So in regards to the anchor tenant, is it possible to hire someone to find one, to go out and look for them?
There are options out there. There are people that have looked at that, and what I've found in my conversations with them, a business of that size that you would consider an anchor tenant, they do their research. They study the regions, they look at the opportunities, they look at cost of living, housing prices, employment availability in terms of the bodies that they could employ. They do all that work themselves. They just want our organisation to be an organisation that is proactive with them, makes links, particularly at a state or federal level wherever we can, and is very facilitating in that process.
What I'm saying though, at the moment, they wouldn't be looking there because we haven't done, it's not there. So for me, having someone go out and find someone who's prepared to go there as the anchor tenant, which would then potentially kick along to the next point, to me, that would be money well spent.
The state often drives that in the sense with these larger businesses know that Gympie Regional Council doesn't have the funding to attract them, so often their first point of call is to talk to the state around opportunities. So now that we're in that space with that land allocated, the state are driving that discussion. It's just like everything, it just seems to take so long. And
is there an announcement for that coming up?
Announcement for current
land, yeah.
Well, it's in a draft regional plan. It's there for everyone to see.
It's not really an announcement, though. I don't know how many people read that, but I imagine it's in the tens.
Well, I guess once that plan is endorsed as the Wide Bay Regional Plan, then there might be some announcement around that. But at the moment, it's a draft. It's a public document. It's there for everyone to see. And the state and federal governments have been aware of that site, those facilities, for a number of years now, because we got that report done in 2020, I believe. I think that's when that started. So it's just been a long conversation, and the wheels just seem to turn at that end far slower than I would like them to.
It depends on their planning scheme. The planning scheme is probably zone rural at the moment. So until it's finalised.
Yeah, but most of the area is currently owned by TMR, so we're in the right space to have those changes made as quickly as the state can. But I think it'd be interesting to see what outcomes you're looking to drive and how we can meet those needs.
So to try and summarise some of the broader discussion here, there's a focus on practical uses. that on ground helping people rather than an abstract document, so we get that clearly. There's a possibility of staff at the right level to do this, not someone who actually guides people and helps them. Building up our existing organisation, whether it's planning, whether it's the industrial side, to support where we already have levers to play and to put things in. And perhaps in terms of the table that was introduced by Mr. Daunt, perhaps somewhere in the intermediate range, if we could find those things to be triggered, might be an acceptable to elected members. I'm just checking if I'm heading down the right direction here, if those practical measures could be achieved.
Councillor Stewart.
Mr Mayor, with the introduction of the employment of the coordinator, has your CEO's workload in terms of the space decreased a bit, or is it? Do you think having a officer underneath that coordinator would help further?
I think the current staff member fills a space that needed to be filled, and is starting to look at strategy documents and that sort of stuff. And yes, the workload has decreased. Simply just attending events, forums and other, whether it's a manufacturing forum or a timber forum, that used to fall into my lap to be council's representative there and push that along. When you've got a staff member that can do that, it frees me up for other things. And I think it's been a welcome, I know from my end it's been a welcomed appointment. I think he is developing good, strong connections, and the feedback I've had from state is that he's developing good connections. They feel he was a good appointment. They believe he's got a good understanding of what needs to be done and is pushing through that space quite well. He hasn't been on deck for a long time now, probably 5 months, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and developing the relationships and continuing on. We have made a lot of ground in this space in spite of the fact that we didn't have some paperwork. We had a vision and we pushed forward with the vision around industrial estate. We've developed strong links with state development and TMR, because TMR do own land and are always part of the conversation. We've created a certain level of momentum and definitely a level of interest from the state for them to actually appoint a staff member to the region. I think if you have a vision, sometimes you can wait for the paperwork to catch up, and that's how we've operated. We've achieved a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm grateful that Andrew's in that chair now, and we'll fulfil all those paperwork obligations and maintain it's the consistent connection with business. One of the opportunities that was considered, they ended up going to New Zealand. Instead of moving equipment from New Zealand to this region, they just maintained the factory or shifted the factory over there to another opportunity because financially it was a better outcome. They will still come to Gympie at some point, but I was making the calls, I was following them up. Having a staff member to do that and consistently do that as part of their role is a far better outcome than relying on myself to sort of juggle that between everything else. It just means we can be more targeted and focused on what we do. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think even just welcoming businesses into town and the concierge, but I have nothing to add. I think we've discussed those major elements. It is highly useful to have someone who's able to build those relationships, achieve results, and understand that council's reason for being here is to actually support our community, which includes our businesses. And so in this particular case, Andrew, who's the incumbent, is doing those things.
Any other comments, questions, councillors? Councillor Milne.
Just probably the CEO, you just did mention the table and we're looking towards the intermediate. So for the 23-24, there'll just be an action plan rather than a strategy, even a basic strategy developed. Is that what we're looking at? Because I'm all about, even a basic strategy would be better than no strategy. I mean, a high level strategy would be lovely, but my personal preference have one we have capacity to do with our lovely guy at the moment. Basic strategy, and then we can build on that later. An action plan, I just don't know if it's got enough for what we need to do for the advocacy or using it for other agencies outside do use our strategies for their information. So that's where I'm heading down the line. I mean, action plan's great, but even a simple strategy would be great too. But the timeline's here for November is probably pushing it as well. So, yeah.
Through the mayor, I'll respond to that in two parts. The first one is, that was the sense I was getting from the room, so, and I guess that's why you're speaking up about it.
Yeah, actually, because it just says plan the whole implemental. I'd like a strategy.
And I think the other one is that if we do good work in this space, it'll inform us in the future on a strategy because we have some of the basic, a better understanding of the key needs. So that could be one way to look at it, but we are servants of the council, so we'll follow whatever the direction is.
If there's nothing else, councillors, thank you, Mr. Lewis. We will, actually, we might just deal with items,
We're inside, isn't it?
5.
We
while we're in open, sorry?
Point 5, we can't.
Well, no, for the conflict of interest.
Right, sorry.
Yes, if you just want to make that declaration, councillor Johnson, while we're here, so we can deal with that.
I was just looking to see what 2.5 was.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll, my daughter's the general manager down there, so I'll.
Okay, no worries, thank you. Councillor, we'll break for
Did you want
a cup of tea. Sorry? Oh, have you got one too? Sorry, councillor Derek.
No, that's all right. I've simply put my hand up for this because I know Ash, Dolly's daughter.
I think we all know that.
Well, I don't. I go to Dolly's place and have dinner for, she has a kid's birthday and Ash is there. So even though we don't hang out, we are there at the same time. So I just thought that's something that is a conflict that, or a potential that people might look at.
So do you want councillors to vote on whether or not?
I think it's best they do, yeah.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions about it?
Councillor Devereux wishes to start the room in relation to item 2.5. Is there someone to move that he does? Councillor Mills, someone to second. Councillor Smurden, all those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. We'll break now for a cup of tea, short morning tea break, and be back.